Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, one stabby chaos coordinator, and a chief shenanigator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guests introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers at home, starting with Madam Chloe Gardner.
Hello, I am Chloe Garner. I am the authoress of various gigantic worlds of science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, paranormal, a little bit of horrors, and then anything where I can go around and ride a horse.
What about a Pegasus? Would that count?
It would absolutely count. Are you kidding?
Okay. What about a unicorn? Would you ride those? Or would they be like zebras and you can't really mount them?
No, unicorns are only for very special people. So if you get to ride a unicorn, you are officially the specialist of the special people.
Like special short bus special or special?
Oh, be nice. Be nice.
I don't know the rules here. I'm just asking.
People would be allowed to ride a unicorn because they are lovely people.
Yes.
Okay. So we've established the qualifications to ride a short bus. All right. I'm sorry. My mind goes weird places. You can't take me anywhere.
And we've only just started.
Next, we have the lovely Miss Jenna S. Brown, who sometimes cosplays as Jenna Ray.
I am Jenna S. Brown. I'm the chief shenanigator around here. I tell people it's a combination of den mother and kitten herder. And that's kind of what it feels like. I write under the pen name Jenna Ray as well as other pen names, but under that pen name, I write science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, and whatever else appeals that kind of fits under that ginormous speculative umbrella.
Okay. And then finally, we have the War Mistress herself of Warhamster and War Master fame, the one, the only Miss Melissa McShane.
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm Melissa McShane. I am the author of many different kinds of fantasy, including urban fantasy, contemporary fantasy, historical fantasy, and some lovely family saga, secondary world fantasy. And I am coming to you live from India, where the power has been out for almost 12 hours. And thank you, Power Inverter, for keeping me online.
Woohoo! So if she disappears, ghosts in the machine.
That's right.
Indeed.
Now, I know, because I watched Stargate, if you step through the interdimensional portal and it shuts down while you're midway, you just disappear. So if you're online, when the power finally dies, do you just cease to be?
Yes.
Okay.
I will cease to be. In fact, it actually works forward and backward in time. So not only will I cease to be, I will never have been. You won't remember me at all.
Well, we better not let that happen. So people light some incense, tweak the crystals, whatever you got to do. We're going to make this happen. All right. So before we get started, we do have the religion question. So we've only got two today, the most specialist of all special religion questions. So first, what is your favorite fairy tale? I will go.
Ask this? Okay.
I was going to let you guys jump in, but I guess we can point and shoot. Jana, what is your favorite fairy tale?
You're muted.
You're muted.
I knew it.
See, I muted myself because I was rolling this thing of cotton yarn and it put floopies in the air and they got in my nose and I thought I was going to do a ginormous kind of sneezing thing and then I didn't and then I forgot that I had muted myself because I like I said, I'd given myself little cotton floaties because I'm making jellyfish. Don't ask why I'm making jellyfish because I don't actually know. But that has nothing to do with any of these things. So I have two that are probably favorites. I love it. The positive octopus. For those for our listeners at home who are not watching, Madam Chloe has a cute little positive octopus that is a little crocheted thing in it. It's adorable. I do love making adorable little things. But I like donkey skin, and I like the 11, 12, 17, however many swans there are in a given version of it, of the various swans. I like that one. But it does, sometimes it's 11 swans and sometimes it's 7 swans, but I like the swan story.
Okay. Chloe, favorite fairy tale?
I like Puss in Boots. And not
Cute.
just because of the adaptation of the later character, though that has brought a shine to it that is just really charming. But he is a very clever character in ways that were really, really unexpected in his era. And I love clever characters.
Is that just because he's a cat who refused to be herded?
I am a kitten and I refuse to be herded.
Yep. That's why it's such a challenge to herd kittens, is because they refuse, and it's kind of, you chase them around and then you pull the treats out, because the treats is
They're
what
so sweet.
comes the closest to working.
Yeah.
Catnip, anybody? No.
Mhm.
All right. What about you, Melissa? Favorite fairy tale?
Oh, I have lots, but my favorite when I was writing a series of fairy tales was the Brementown Musicians, because I love the way the story interacts with. Well, it's clever, and the characters never actually make it to Brementown, so there's that subversion. I kind of like that too.
So it'd be like the musicians that almost make it to Bremerton.
Yes, the almost Bremerton musicians, or the farmhouse musicians, or something like that. They just never get there.
Okay. Well, it's all about the journey. It's not the destination or something. So I came up with 3. It's probably because there are only 3 I remember reading as a kid, but Hansel and Gretel, I always enjoyed that one. My very German grandmother would read that to me. She was always very upset at the Disneyfication of fairy tales. That was like a personal affront to her. It's probably a good thing she never met Walt Disney. She'd have kicked him in the shin. And so I like Hansel and Gretel, The Emperor's New Suit, because it's kind of got a good moral lesson. Although I have heard it argued it's a fable, not a fairy tale. So we'll discuss. And then the Billy Goat's Gruff. And that one might be a fable too. I don't know. But I remember all 3 of them. I'll lump them together. And if I'm wrong, you can tell me I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the next part, the most important of all important questions, dear listener. We are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blade podcast. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So coffee or tea. And how do you drink it when you're reading a fairy tale? Gianna.
Oh, it is really, really warm here lately, so there is nothing that is hot. So I stick with my beloved Diet Dr. Pepper with coconut and lemons and, limes. Limes are better than lemons. I did have to use lemons because we ran out of limes, but limes make it better. And all of the ice that I can shove in there. I have this giant thing, and the truth is it's up to ice to about here, and then I pour stuff over it, so it's really, really, really cold. And then my poor husband looks at me and he goes, the thermodynamics of that are just awful, and it's going to be watered down. I'm like, not if I drink it fast enough.
It's true.
This hurts me. I had to put Coke on ice because it wastes a perfectly good Coke.
No, I don't mind at all.
Do you sing the coconut song when you do that, and the lime and the lemon and the coconut?
The lime and the
I
coconut?
totally did.
Sometimes, yes.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
me
and
too.
we introduced my daughter to that song through the best way to be introduced to that song, which is because the Muppets did it, and Kermit the Frog singing Lying in the Coconut is hysterical.
So my youngest was very afraid of elevators for a while with his sensory autism issues. So that was the song we sang as we did the crazy elevator dance. And yes, everyone pointed and laughed at us, but he was so distracted by us being goofballs that he forgot to be afraid at the motion stuff. And that was the song that was the one we sang because it just has such a beat that's easy to act like a fool to.
It does. It's true.
So, well, do you at least put it in like a crazy fairy tale-esque cup, like something magical with, I don't know, unicorns or I don't know, something magical?
I would have to have the right kind of cup to have the thermodynamics that I want, because I love this mug because it keeps everything really, really cold. And some of the other cups that I have, while they are beautiful, they do not keep things cold. Now, if I'm just drinking it for a meal or something, maybe, but if I'm in a nursery through the day while I'm reading, it's got to keep things cold.
Okay. All right. That's a valid answer. Chloe?
I have a ceramic water bottle that is perfect for fairy tales, and I'm going to see if I can order delivery of it to this room. One moment.
So when you're drinking it for your fairy tales, because you got your tiara, do you also do the pinky up?
So I drink my tea purple.
All right.
Here we go. Yes. I got my
nice.
kombucha. It is yummy blackberry. And yes, it's
Definitely.
One of the things I learned in Melissa's Discord, because I was confused. I always thought porridge was just a synonym for oatmeal. Turns out I was wrong. And as we were Googling it, apparently people put blackberries in porridge.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew?
and honey and raisins and It's kind of like a sandwich.
So
Yeah.
some of the
If you want
people
to
in her
put turkey
Discord,
in there, nobody is going to tell you that you're a terrible person. They
That's
just
right.
won't share.
apparently some of the
Anything you
people
want.
thought I was uncultured swine because I did not know these things. But I'm
Well,
okay.
you have to learn sometime. And
I mean, I've been called worse things, so and they're not wrong. So we'll move on. All right, what about you, Melissa? While we wait for her coffee mug.
oh,
Or
it's
water
Coca-Cola. It's Coca-Cola all the way. And living in India, I have resorted to actually having to pour it over ice because it warms up so fast. And warm Coca-Cola is not my favorite thing. So
wow.
yeah, it's not fun. I actually bought an ice maker so that I could have ice cubes, so that I could have cold Coca-Cola. And about half the time that's what I do. But the Coke comes in little big cans that are like 300 milliliters. And so you can usually drink it fast enough that it's not warm. But they also come in giant 750 milliliter bottles. And those are lovely.
So for those of you who don't know, 300 milliliters in Freedom units is roughly 10 ounces. So a 12-ounce can.
Yeah, it's a little smaller than a 12-ounce can. But
And
the bottles,
I didn't
the
just know that, I Googled it.
the Coca-Cola bottles you get in a 6-pack from the store are 16.9 milliliters.
Fluid ounces.
No, fluid ounces, sorry, and it's a 500 milliliter bottle.
Okay. All right, and it looks like Chloe has the
Let's see.
the cup incoming.
Yeah.
And if you are not listening, it is magical.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, it's
Ooh.
meaty.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Next time I am in Colonial Williamsburg, I will get the one that has that colonial flower pattern that's like the blue and white. That's so pretty.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'll have to send all of you ladies one because
Yeah.
that looks magical and it's a taste of history. So you can be
That's right.
sophisticated. The Queen drank out of something like that once, maybe. I don't know. But it's the right pattern when they had queens here. So we'll go with it. All right. So the next part of this introduction, this discussion, dear listener, is we're going to air that commercial early so we don't interrupt ourselves on the panel as we've taken to doing. And for your convenience, we would like to thank you as you pause and we shamelessly shill for the woman.
Beginner witch Chloe has a problem. There's a frog in her tub who says he used to be a man. Worse, his memory is slipping away from him. Magic doesn't work, so there's only one way she can think of to turn him back. But can't she bring herself to do it? And that's only the beginning of her challenges. In these 14 short fairy tale retellings, including Little Red Riding Hood, The Frog Prince, and The Princess and the Pea, follow the adventures of Chloe and her family as they fall into one fairy tale after another. Warts and All is written by Melissa McShane. This expanded deluxe edition includes 3 new stories and illustrations by Caitlin Walsh. Find it at nightharborpress.com or your favorite bookseller.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude as we shamelessly shilled for the woman. And if you want to buy it, it is suggested that you buy it from Night Harbor Press because for every book you buy from there, Janet gets an inch back in her basement, and she is very happy when she gets that inch. So
It's true.
true story. And with that out of the way, we have to define our terms. So first, what is a fairy tale? So according to the Oxford Dictionary, because I can use more than Wikipedia, people, a children's story about magical and imaginary beings and lands. That's the Oxford Dictionary. According to other sources, which is Grok, because it was cheap and easy, and it pulled from Wikipedia, which I also linked to, and a website called fairytale.org. And it's official because it's .org, so you have to trust it. But a fairy tale is a type of short folklore featuring magical elements, imaginary creatures, fairies, giants, talking animals, etc., and a battle between good and evil, often ending with a happily ever after. They are often passed down through generations, beginning with once upon a time, and frequently teach moral lessons. And then, as a side note on that definition, fairy tales are distinct from fables, which are shorter and more strictly focused on a moral lesson, often using only animals. And I don't know where folklore fits into that. Is that just a generic umbrella that both fit under? I could not find an answer. So let's discuss that, and then we'll discuss the reimaginings.
Okay. Yeah, I think you could say folklore is a generic umbrella term for a lot of things. Not just the stories, but the received wisdom of different cultures. You know, the stories that they tell about themselves. and things like, I mean, even the little things like if you, I don't know, walk in the woods at night, you'll get eaten by wolves or something like that, is not necessarily folklore, but a warning. But it's that same kind of thing, you know, that you get different people saying things about what they believe the world is, and so folklore is kind of the big thing, and then fairy tales are a subset of that, I would think.
I think that folklore needs to be inherited, and
Mm.
you can have faux folklore that
Yeah.
is trying to draw on the tropes and the feeling of folklore. But in order to be true folklore, it needs to be something that has been handed down in traditional storytelling, which means that not all fairy tales will be folklore and not all fables will be folklore. But folklore is almost exclusively fairy tales and fables. I think, because I don't think that the Aeneid qualifies.
No.
I think that that is something else. So it's smaller stories intended for a younger audience, or intended to encapsulate some kind of reality of the world in a simple way that makes it folklore. But they're fairy tales running around that have nothing to do with the inherited story, and I think that that doesn't make them not fairy tales. It just makes them not folk.
And a lot of times in folklore, you get characters and such that are larger than life, but they're kind of inherently that way versus magic wands or, the fairy godmother that allows something to happen. You get Paul Bunyan, who just happens to be ginormous. He was
Why
just
not?
born that way.
Yeah.
But and you don't have a magical this is why, or he prayed and got a baby the size of a thumb. It's just Paul Bunyan was born really, really big, and he liked to cut down trees. And of course, Babe the Blue Ox is his friend because he is also a giant ox. And it just is. You don't lean into necessarily a magical kind of thing, even though they're extraordinary people. Because Bill is the same kind of thing. The kid that fell out of the back of the wagon, was raised by wolves, found his horse, and did all these amazing things. He's larger than life, but he's not necessarily magical. And I think we see that a lot in the difference between folklore and fairy tales. Is sometimes it's that accepted larger than life, but we don't necessarily ascribe magic to it in the same way that fairy tales can. Again, they don't even always, but very often they do.
Yeah.
And I do agree that often they're teaching a lesson of some sort where it's, if you are good, then good things happen. If you are bad, then bad things happen. And what are those things that are out in the dark that you shouldn't be challenging? Because kids that challenge things in the dark get eaten.
And we have the difference between fable and fairy tale, that we can just tell the difference. Like if somebody's telling you Aesop's fables, that's a fable and not a fairy tale, even though a lot of the Grimm fairy tales that were collected were about the devil and were warning. I mean, they were seriously warning people about the dangers of evil and Satan and not being a good person. So it's still moralizing, but not in the way that a fable does.
Okay.
I feel like a fable doesn't really have characters so much as it has things that happen to people of various natures.
Or concepts. I mean, the tortoise and the hare, for example, those are stand-ins for sloth and, well, not sloth, but slowness and quickness. And, so fables are like that. Yeah.
So if the moral lesson is required, would that make Passion Tales, which was the old plays that taught Bible lessons, would that make them folk tales or fairy tales then? Because they're teaching moral lessons?
I think
I don't know.
Folk, because the passed down
But
nature.
now they are. I think at the time they would not have been.
They would have been.
They would have been religious
fable.
Yeah. So yeah, but I mean, you could say that about any folklore, I guess, because the reason it's passed down is because it was important. But at the time that it was first told, it was, was it really? Could you really consider it folklore for the first person who told that story? But yeah, I think originally they were religious stories, and now whatever we have left of them is folklore.
Okay.
And you do get, interesting categories of folklore, because you get things like the Jack Tales that started in Europe, and then as the immigrants came, they brought those to Appalachia, and then it took on its very own thing as it mixed with the various populations there. And so the jacktails and that kind of stuff, they're very specific to that area. They have a certain kind of structure to them. Whether or not Clever Jack is always the same person, you can argue. There's so many things you can get into as far as, what makes them work. And then you tie that into I live out in the West, and so a lot of the folk tales that we have are pioneer tales that were very often picked up from the native population. And so it's kind of an interesting conglomeration, but it really is that umbrella of tales that we tell to do a little bit more than entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like that old Supreme Court, I don't know that I got a definition, but I'll know it when I see it kind of thing.
Darn straight.
And I am dancing around that, dear listener. You know what I'm talking about, and I know what I'm talking about, but we're not going to talk about that today. So, but the gist of that is what we were going for. So that kind of sounds like it applies. It's one of those things where you just sort of intuitively know what applies.
Well, and it's a question of shades. How much complexity can you put into a story before it becomes something other than a fairy tale? And is now just a fantasy with the right characters to be a fairy tale. It needs to have a simpler structure. It needs to have a simpler conflict resolution that's usually going to be pointing at something that's true about the world. And sometimes it's very morality play. And sometimes it's the cat and the dog and the donkey go walking down the road and they're friends and they want to play instruments. The end. Like, you can be happy where you are, and it's not a big morality play with a huge lesson out of it. It's that this is what life looks like. But they're talking about a simple element of what life looks like that has value to create a more whole picture of life. It's not all wolves, but the wolves are certainly there.
And the world, we talk about, say, Cinderella as having a huge number of varieties from all over the world, but a lot of the concept of fairy tale is impressed on other cultures as a way for us to understand the stories that they're telling. So they would never call them fairy tales. I had to research Bengali stories for one of my books, and I came across a collection that was it was billed as being Bengali fairy tales. Which in the, it's a stretch, but you could call them that, but they're longer, they're complex. They don't really match the definition of a Western fairy tale. So then the question is that still a fairy tale, or are we just sort of putting that stamp on something that's alien so we can categorize it? And I'm not sure I know the answer to that. They were really interesting stories, and it was a look into the Bengali culture that comes at it from a perspective that isn't historical or sociological, really. And I was fascinated by it, but it did kind of make me start thinking about the nature of what we call fairy tales outside the Western, tradition.
Even in the Western tradition. I was listening to somebody years ago, and I'm going to butcher the name. Please forgive me, those of you who actually know what I'm talking about. But he was talking about Cuchulainn from Irish tradition. And the stories of all the crazy things that he did. And I'm like, this is fascinating. And I love mythology, and I love the Western tradition of storytelling. And I know nothing about this. So I went and tried to look it up, and I could not find a thread of a story that made a lick of sense to me. Because they aren't telling fairy tales in the Germanic tradition. They're telling stories with the real fairies in them, guys. And it's a completely different structure to try to communicate. I can't understand what it is that they're trying to tell me. And I really want an Irish grandmother to sit me down and tell me these stories like I'm 6 so that I can understand them, because that's what they're made for. And Wikipedia was worthless, and the web resources I was able to find couldn't tell me the story. And I'm like, no, who is he, and what did he do, and what is important about him? And I can do this with Hercules. If I tell you Hercules, can you tell me Cuchulainn? And it's a fairy tale. I think mythology and fairy tales is a really interesting overlap to
there's another
but I think that it qualifies as a fairy tale because we're talking about the fairies. Like, these are the fairies, and It's a completely different style of story than what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So
still recognizable. And isn't that the
Yeah.
funny thing? Because you hear these. I studied Welsh for a while, and we did Welsh tales, and they still felt like recognizably fairy tales, even when some of the styles of the telling weren't things that I immediately grokked onto, because we still have that. It's still, like Melissa said, it's the reflection of life lessons that have been put into these stories, sometimes with the addition of historical figures or various other things, but we're still pulling those life lessons from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead, JR.
So speaking of still pulling from them, it's going to be the worst blunt force segue in the history of the podcast. But
Oh dear.
we've talked about what they are. Why are they still resonating to the point where you have entire genres of people reimagining these stories in intricate ways, some of them so profane that the original creators of the stories would probably be rolling over in their grave?
It's because they're the substrate of our own stories. This is how human story evolves. I think that fantasy is a universal language in a way that you can talk about anything in fantasy with and overcome all of the differences that people have and still have a productive conversation. And that has a substrate in how do you understand what story is and how to communicate narrative, and this has had to be developed over thousands of years. It's not even just the roots of the stories that we can find, but the roots of the stories that came before those. They're embedded in how the human brain works, because the things that survive are the ones that work. And so those stories reflect us and we reflect them, and it's a profound sort of pairing between biology and history, that the ones that are real, they're going to work because they're real.
And you look at the structure of a fairy tale, and it is compressed to be the structure of everything. It is, you have all these other longer form stories and even longer form poems to a lesser extent, but the fairy tale is a quick way of teaching a child, this is how we tell story. This is what you need. This is character. This is plot. This is theme. And all of those, I mean, that's the fundamental building blocks of any fiction. And I think that fairy tales combine with, for Western readers, the Bible, in terms of the stories that we know that are, that we build on. Everybody knows about Noah's Ark, even if you're not religious. Everybody knows about Cinderella, even if you have not seen or heard the story since you were a small child. These are just, what makes us. They're that vocabulary. And, in addition to what Chloe was saying, they're the substrate of our belief, and they're the vocabulary that we use to express it.
Right. And the other thing is, a lot of fairy tales, especially the ones that have remained really, really popular, they express things that people want, that they want to believe, that they want to see themselves doing. Cinderella is popular because who doesn't want to be the poor, poverty-stricken girl who wins the heart of the prince and is raised up out of that? That is a story that we tell in lots of different formats, that idea that you can go from rags to riches. That's Crazy Rich Asians. That's all sorts of stories that we base on that. Beauty and the Beast is the same kind of thing, that you can find somebody who has a beastly aspect, whatever that is, and that through goodness, through love, through things like that, and
Giant library.
counter arguments, a very big library, all those kinds of things, that you can find beauty inside of something that doesn't look like it's beautiful, and that there can be happiness there. There's a lot of those stories where we go, yeah, it's because it's either something we want or something, again, that we want to guard against. We tell our children Little Red Riding Hood because we don't want them going off with strangers. The idea that strangers are a problem, and we take you to a fantastical place. So it's going to play over and over again, because it's either things that we want and stories that we all hope for, or the things that we're teaching our children not to do.
The things we fear.
And
Don't mess with witches.
on that, you mentioned some of the differences between cultures. And I remember growing up, and Alibaba is a fairy tale. I grew up hearing that story, and it was the bad guy because he's the thief, right? Thieving is bad. You don't take other people's stuff. When I was serving overseas, that was not how the people that had heard that story from the countries over there when I was in Iraq, so the Mesopotamian nations, understood that fable, because when I would acquire things, because they were often not well supplied by the companies that hired them. So, having been a member of the E4 Mafia once upon a time, allegedly, I scrounged for stuff that the army gave for soldiers that suddenly just fell off the back of a van for them. So, they were getting supplies, and I didn't think anything of it. Like, my job was to take care of them, so it was just part of the job. But for them, that was a huge deal, and that's what they called me. They called me Alibaba, but it wasn't an insult. That was like a compliment for them, because they did not. They did not like all the soldiers we worked with. Some of them treated them like garbage, and they got garbage results, because when you're nice to people, they do nice things for you too. And so that's when I realized that, like, sometimes our understanding in the West doesn't always match up with the source material from the cultures they came from.
Yeah.
So now, do you think any genre of speculative fiction lends itself better to the reimagining of fairy tales? I see a lot of it in the romance space, but I don't know that that's because that's where it works, or just because romance is such a prolific genre. There's a lot of it out there.
No, I think it could be anything. I mean, what's Cinder? I mean, Cinder is I haven't read it, but it's Cinderella on a moon.
But it's romance, right?
Well, no, it's science fiction, sort of.
Yeah. It's science fiction with a romantic subplot.
It's just that
we do see that a lot.
There are a lot of romance, stories in fairy tales, and so romance, that appeals to it. But you write fantasy romance, even if it's not romantasy, it's fantasy with a romance subplot, and that works really well for retelling.
See, that's a whole nother podcast we've got to do now. What's the difference between a romance novel and a novel with a romance subplot? Because I say it had the romance, it's a romance novel, move on.
No.
It's not true, JR.
And love stories are different too. There's a lot of
so that feels like a new panel that we have to write down and dive into. And I, much like the strong female character episode, I will get lots of hate mail, and everyone will tell me I'm wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, we'll tell you you're wrong on the podcast. So
on air, man.
We'll cut to the chase.
Yeah, there you go. And I'll get the emails too, so it's all good. But no, I considered Cinder, like, the romance was the key element for me, so that's what made it romance. When you see a lot of the reimagined fairy tales, that what I am seeing, they all are focused on a romantic undertone, whether it's a romance novel or a novel with romance in it. That seems to be the underlying storyline.
There are Little Red Riding Hood retellings that have little or no romantic element to them at all. I mean, to pull from the stuff that has the broader audiences, Hoodwinked is a fantastic reimagining of Little Red Riding Hood. Has zero romantic element, and Andy, what's his name, as an evil bunny. I mean, come on now. It's fantastic, and it's very playful, and it's got none of that. But the reality is that a lot of the striving in life is to find a place where you are settled. And for a large majority of the population in the history of the world, that means finding romance, finding marriage, finding happiness within a family. And that's a perfectly appropriate reality for the balance of the stories. That's a fine ratio. Romance has a structure. It has a specific structure. I'm going to say it, and I'm not going to argue it any further, but romance has a structure. There are stories that have large romantic elements to them, but the conflict is something else. If the conflict is not the romance, the story is not a romance. If the conflict is aliens, it is not a romance.
That's right.
It is an alien story with a romance in it. You can tell a science fiction story where the conflict is a romance. That's a real thing. And a romantasy is a fantasy where the romance is the conflict. As big as everything else going on in there, that's what the conflict is. And some fables and some fairy tales are romances by the beats. But a lot more of them are about a man takes a journey. And they retell as a man takes a journey wherever you could put them in a bus on Mars full of nuns. Did that in the wrong order.
We get the idea.
Yeah, we'll just rearrange that mentally. It's fine. It's
We got it.
fine.
Okay. But yeah, you can tell those stories anywhere,
Mhm.
and they work, and that's what the retellings are doing, is giving those characters a modern voice or a different setting and asking the same question to see if it remains true. And mostly they conclude that yes, it remains true. Sometimes they don't, and they're allowed to, and I think they're wrong mostly, but that's okay. They're allowed. That's what writers do. But the
Mhm.
retellings are there to ask the question: does this story still make sense?
Mhm.
And you tell the story, and it does, and that's the magic of it.
And it's interesting because when you're looking at doing a retelling or a reimagining, a lot of times you go back to the original and you kind of boil down to say, well, what is this story about? And there's the trappings on the outside that, we'll go with the Seven Swans,
Yeah.
that, okay, it's a king who has these sons and a daughter. He remarries because there's stepmother issues that I have a whole thing on that too now that I am a stepmother. I have completely different ways of looking at, but all aside, um, and that when she shows up, she's jealous of the children and ends up as a witch, turning the boys into swans, and the girl has to go and find her brothers. And there is kind of a romance in there that eventually she runs into a prince, but he's not actually the important part of this.
Mhm.
She is not worried about the romance with him. He falls in love with her. She is working to free her brothers from a curse.
She's on
And
a
so
quest.
she's
Yeah.
on a quest. So if I'm going to retell that story, those are the things that I need to take apart to go, okay, so the important thing is that you have this family bond, that you have this quest, that they're going to be separated and the men are going to be cursed. And then what happens when you bring them together and they tell her, sister, this is what has to happen in order to break the curse. We found out, but it's not something we can do for ourselves. And it's something that for you is going to be painful and difficult. And we don't want you to do it. And initially they don't, because it's going to cost so much. But it's that cost of familial love that she's, of course, this is a thing that I'm going to do. And down to the last stitch, down to the point that they're dragging her away to burn her as a witch, she is still weaving nettles into shirts in order to save her brothers. And
Mhm.
so those are the aspects that I would take and go, okay, well, if I'm going to break that urban fantasy, then how am I going to weave in those things that are the most important? Where would you put that? What kind of city would that be in? What do people turn into? If it's not swans, what would be the urban fantasy equivalency of cursing
Mhm.
somebody and turning them into something? So you would look for those things because that's the part that holds true. And when our readers go through and read it as readers, we want to recognize those things. If I'm reading Cinder, there's got to be a shoe at some point. Because if there's not a shoe, whether it's glass or fur or whatever, it's not a Cinderella story. So it's identifying those as a reader for me.
And deciding what those elements are. I mean, you can vary the creature that the brothers turn into in the Seven Swans. If you make it so that she doesn't succeed at her quest because she gives up for love, that's not the story anymore.
Right.
So there's only so much give that a fairy tale retelling can handle and still be the fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
So, why there are some common tropes like you see a lot of, and I don't know how much of this is a Disneyfication because it all gets mixed in my head for me. But you see a lot of the anti-step parents. Now, from my perspective as a historian, a lot of that's less about stepmoms are evil and more about we want to secure the inheritance and f those kids that came first. But life was cheap once upon a time, and so we didn't value it like we do in modernity, and that's something if you're looking at the long arm of history, you have to wrap your head around. But are there other themes that are common that you see a lot in fairy tales, aside from the wicked stepmother trope?
Well, you always ice the mom
Mhm.
because conflict comes from mom not being there.
Yeah.
Well, and
And
people
that's
who have a
lovely.
loving maternal figure in their life very often don't have the same level of trouble and problems that we end up seeing our heroes and heroines have, because
Mhm.
moms divert a lot of that. It's kind of their role in the family unit, and when that role is gone, it's much easier for that family unit to be rocked.
You see a lot of the quest structure, particularly in the third son going out to make his fortune. Diana Wynne Jones deals with this in Howl's Moving Castle, the book, where she says that the oldest daughter, who is the main character of the book, knows from the beginning that she's meant to be a failure because it's always the third child who goes out and is successful and has adventures. And of course, she's subverting that idea, but she's addressing that element of the fairy tale where the third son is the one who gets the cat, and his brothers all got an inheritance and he got a cat. And what do you make of that? And so you have these stories of people who are outside what the law provides in whatever sense. I mean, you're talking about protecting the inheritance. Well, the oldest son got the inheritance and the youngest son went into the military or the clergy. And this is the alternative. And what an interesting story that must have been for people back in the day when you did have the expectation of, if you're a third son, you've got nothing. But wouldn't it be great if that could be otherwise? Wouldn't it be great if being the third son meant something better? So you see that theme a lot. I'm not sure how well it translates into retellings, but that's a really important aspect of fairy tale is what if? What if this were different? What if society were different? What if I didn't have a mother to protect me? That just keeps going.
Good, Chloe.
The fairy tales are often they're the precursors to the overarching story types that we have. A man goes on a journey, a man and a woman fall in love, a monster comes to town. And the fairy tales knock those out of the park from point blank range over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
Because they made the format. We have these story types because fairy tales know how to use them. You have a Jack and a Beanstalk where the monster comes to town and you have to go deal with it. And there's no romance and there's not even that much of a character arc. I mean, Jack is kind of as much of an idiot when he comes back down as he was when he went up.
Yeah. He didn't really learn. He didn't really learn.
Fairy tales are not always about people learning lessons.
Yeah.
They're about people accomplishing a quest. And doing something that has value. You don't have to be a different person when you finish doing something valuable. You just have to do something valuable.
Yeah.
And those are the structures that fairy tales pioneered.
And I think another common thing that we see in them is be nice to old women because they will curse your butt. Or they will be, because you're thinking Beauty and the Beast, it's very often he is unkind to the enchantress because he doesn't know that that's what she is and ends up in trouble. And how many times is it the guy on the quest going through the woods is the only one that stops for the old woman and takes care of her, and sometimes the old man too, but more frequently it's old women, and comes to find out that she gives him, now I'm thinking the 12 Dancing Princesses, and she gives him the information that he needs to not fall for the same tricks everybody else has. And she tells him, don't eat the food. Make sure that you do these things. Here's a cool cloak that makes you invisible. Because he's kind. And so kindness in these stories is very, very often rewarded in a way that sometimes in the real world we don't see. We want to believe that when you're kind to people, that will always come back to you. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And I think with fairy tales, it almost always does. And so that's an encouraging thought when you're telling these tales, when you're reimagining these tales, is that idea that, yeah, the guy who is kind to the person in the woods, the guy who takes the time to do the extra thing gets to win in the end because they weren't a jerk.
Well, and the, look at the kind of self-serving nature of that. Who were the ones telling these stories? The old women, the women who were the keepers of the lore. And, so yeah, I love that the idea that they sort of inserted this, be kind to old women, because you never know when one of them will turn out to be a witch. And that's a protection for them as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that doing that ultimately led to some of the, the persecution of the eccentric old woman that was suddenly, oh, she's a witch, hanger, burner, whatever?
No.
No.
I think the stories work
Not
because there's truth in them. And
Yeah.
I think that women being a repository of the old ways and the old knowledge it's she's deeply personal these days, where the knowledge that we had in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s is just gone, and we're trying to figure out how to go get it back again. But the old women are the repositories of the old ways and the old knowledge, and there's truth in that. And I think that the new always resents and fears the old and the unknown.
Mhm.
And I think that men don't like it when women have power. Not universally at all, but
Some men do not
historically,
like
the pattern repeats
Yeah.
itself consistently. This is
Well,
not
the
an
power-
accusation; it's an identification of a pattern.
Yeah.
And when you have an opportunity to break women's guilds by calling them old witches and chasing them around, there are going to be unscrupulous people all over the world and all over time who are willing to do that.
Well, I have been
Powerful men are
reading.
threatened by powerful women because it's a different kind of power, and in a lot of ways not a power they can fight, so they fight it by making the old woman the witch.
Well, and it's an interesting thing. There was a whole article and a series of studies that I read at one point where they were looking into the argument for grandmothers. Because it says, from a biological point of view, here you have females of the species that get into their 50s and they stop biology. There are no more children after that point. And we're one of the few things, there's a couple of primates and a couple of other animals that get to a point, yes, where they stop having kids, and yet they live on. Most other species, as soon as you're no longer childbearing, they age very rapidly and they die. They get very, very weak, all this kind of stuff. But yet humans, we are biologically programmed to have grandmothers. And grandmothers continue to be really, really important. And it was looking at that and saying, what is it that biologically we've selected for women who will live for another 40 or 50 years after they're no longer childbearing? And yet that's so important to society and to the biology, to the passing on of things that allow future generations to survive. And these stories tie into that because we have grandmother figures, we have older women figures, because they're the ones that pass these things on. They're the ones that know and that make sure that the future generations survive.
Yeah.
Old women know stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
poor JR.
Yeah. Speaking as the old woman. Oh my gosh.
I know when to shut up and say nothing.
Yep. Sometimes you just
Very
take
wise.
I do think that some of that is changing just because culture has changed and shift, and gender roles and dynamics have shifted, and the age gaps that allowed the women to outlive the husbands, like you saw. It wasn't that they were living significantly older than their male counterparts, because if you do the metadata, if you made it past 5, you're just as likely to live to the same age we would. It's just such a high curve of infant mortality and then illness in the early years. It's just because if you're 19 and you're marrying a guy who's 40, if you have this, even the exact same lifespan, 80 years, there's still going to be that gap, right? Because you're younger than your partner, and that gives use. I don't want to say use is like, it gives purpose when your partner isn't there outside of that. And as that has changed, because you can Google any social media platform, and like the idea of age gap relationships is like, oh my God, you're all crazy. And so I think that disparity in the ages is you're seeing less of the role of the grandmother. So given that, with that social change, do you think the role of fairy tales is still going to emphasize the grandmother figure, or do you think that's going to evolve as society has evolved?
Old women know stuff.
Yep.
Okay, but in terms of fairy tale retellings, how often is it just about the young person and the older generations don't show up? If we're getting fairy tales from the retellings rather than from the source, I wonder how that affects our understanding of fairy tales. Like, how many people know Beauty and the Beast and, oh yeah, she has a great library. Well, that wasn't part of the original story. That was probably Robin McKinley inserting that into the legend. And you will not convince me that Disney did not raid that book.
Oh, no
because
kidding.
it was too close. There was too much similarities. But
So that did,
sorry,
I
go
was,
ahead.
I was to say, as a young man growing up, it taught me two very valuable lessons. You didn't have to be the best looking man out there. You didn't have to be the nicest man out there. You just had to be rich and have a library.
That's right.
Because ladies love the books.
That's true.
That's what I learned in that lesson.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's just a question that occurs to me, is if we're getting the stories from a different source, do they have the same impact, or are they even doing the same thing that the original fairy tales did?
It depends on whether or not you have faith in fairy tales, and I do.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think that the things that stick are going to be real, and they're going to be paired to human biology in important ways. And that all of the wild experimentation that goes on the sidelines falls away because it does not last. It does not have the characteristics and the qualities necessary to last. I think that the wise old mentor as a trope, as a parallel to the wise old woman in the woods,
Mhm.
you have the wise old mentor who takes on a new apprentice and teaches him what he needs to know in order to succeed in the quest that's before him. This is a real trope too. I don't want to say that this is just a women's thing. The
Right.
wise old man is a really big deal.
Mhm.
The wise old woman just tends to be a little bit quirkier. But both of those, I think, continue to show up all over storytelling, because it is the wise old man who sends the young man on his quest over and over and over again. And it is the wise old woman who steps in with the knowledge that you need to be successful on your quest.
Mhm.
And you have to be nice to her, because if you're not, she'll turn you into a frog.
Yeah.
But
Zap.
these are real tropes that I think, even if we pretend that we're ignoring them,
Mhm.
they don't work. The stories don't work without them the same way, and we know that because
Mhm.
we are our biology. And we can enjoy stories where it's all beautiful young people romping around on a cruise liner and singing and dancing, whatever. But if you don't have a source of wisdom for those characters, they're shallow and they're meaningless. They're not doing something important, they're doing something hedonistic.
Mhm.
And the stories don't last. It's the ones that get the storytelling right. I believe in fairy tales. If they get the
So-
storytelling right, they will become part of the canon.
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
thinking about The Proposal and
Mhm.
what was Betty White's role? You know,
Yeah.
as this wise old woman, the matriarch
Yeah,
of the
she was great.
family, that would show up at these times and would tell them the things that they needed
Mhm.
to hear.
Mhm.
And would say, "Oh, of course you're in love with him. Of course you've got this going on." The ability to tell the truth, and you see that again also in the older man figure. I think the other interesting thing when we're looking at this with reimaginings is the audience that they're written to, because a lot of times the ones that are written more specifically to YA, you do get more of a focus on what is the young person doing, the quest part of it, the romance part of it, that kind of thing. You may not see some of these other things as much, but then as you get into adult books and that kind of thing, we see a lot more of that come back because older readers want to see ourselves reflected, which is why you get paranormal women's fiction has a lot of fairy tale retellings underlying where these women are now, taking power and having paranormal stories in their 40s and 50s and beyond, because they're fairy tale readers, and now they want to see themselves reflected in those roles. And so you see them taking those roles and adjusting them for an older audience. So I do think you see all sides of it, and I think they continue to be very, very important to the way that we tell stories.
And to answer my own question, I would argue that the reason these retellings are successful is because we know the originals,
Mhm.
because they're resonating with us. I think that if you had just a retelling, it wouldn't have that power, because it's like Chloe was saying, those, some of these just don't last. And so it makes me think of it now that I am old enough to be a grandmother and probably won't be, thinking about children and wondering how are they getting fairy tales? Are their parents still telling them these stories? Are they seeing them somewhere else? And I think it matters, because I think we don't want to lose these stories. I think that they're too important to us to just give up on, and
So-
I think we need them.
On that note, this is where we remind you, if you have young kids, read to them, tell them stories. They don't have to be
Yes.
fairy stories, but read to your kids. It makes a difference later in life. There's science behind that. Don't trust me. Trust the internet and the WebMD and all the doctors
Trust
who are
the
smarter than
science.
you. Trust the science. Real science, not the made up stuff on the internet. So one of the things that you had me thinking, Chloe, we talked about, smart women know things, or old women know things, right?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a distinction between the role and the character archetype of the wise old woman versus the uncle old mentor type, right? And I'm thinking like of Uncle Iroh from The Last Airbender, who's famously told the Fire Lord, wisdom has been chasing you, but you have always been faster. Like, he's got the sharp wit. He's got the monkey from The Lion King, right? It's always like harsh, kind of, I don't want to say manly, but it's definitely, it relates in a way that boys and men relate with each other versus the emotions and the cuddling. Like the old joke, if my friends are nice to me, I wonder if I made them mad. When they're calling me names, I know we're good. Do you think there's a difference in how those, in these fairy tales, the wise old woman versus the mentor male figure interact in the story?
Oh, absolutely. Women build networks. That is the power of women. Men build things. That is the power of men. So an old man mentoring a young man builds him. And that means breaking down the things that need to not be there and building up the things that need to be there. And I'm bizarrely a Karate Kid with this.
I don't
That's
think
all,
that's
man.
bizarre at all. Yeah, that makes total sense.
You take away what needs to go, and you're as aggressive as you need to be because you know what you're doing, because you're a wise old man. Wise old women are building a network of knowledge that is much, much bigger than themselves. And they carry that with them. They pass it on to other women. They bring up women around them who are going to carry that knowledge with them into the future. And it's just a dispensing of the key piece of that to your character, unless you have a woman who's going to be a handmaiden to one of the old crones, which is a real story, where she is spending a lifetime absorbing the knowledge that this woman has as a part of her community. But women are network builders, and so the way that builds itself into a story tends to be either by brushing contact. This is the piece of information that you need that you're not going to get from anywhere else, because I tend to a network of thousands of women that cover thousands and thousands of square miles, and we have this knowledge. Whereas the man is building something and getting to an objective.
Yeah, but this is not to say that wise old women are kind and cuddly about the way that they put forth knowledge or that they bring you up. And now I'm thinking Granny Weatherwax from Terry Pratchett. And they step into one point where they're doing a fairy tale and we're the godmothers, and they're not nice. And Granny Weatherwax is never nice, except for when she wants to be. And so in the moments where she is, you pay more attention, because most of the time she's pretty, sarcastic and very, very straightforward. So it's not to say that they're always snuggly, because that is not necessarily the case, but they do have that role, and they are building up that there tends to be a forward-looking, how does this affect lots of different pieces that comes from the way that they're putting things, where an older an old mentor may be just pushing that first person into the right place, and then he's going to just kind of wait and see how it goes from there.
And if women are the guardians of the knowledge, if they're the custodians of the knowledge, guardians have to be fierce. Guardians can't just let anybody pass. So yeah, I think that maybe there is a slight connection between the idea of the old woman as witch, because they can be scary. And I think that's great. I think if Granny Weatherwax is being nice to you, you had better look for the hidden knife.
Oh yeah, because she's got one.
Okay. I have not read that one, so I don't know the reference.
I
but
know you are in trouble. You have not read the Discworld novels, and they
What?
have great new audiobook presentations that you must try
Mhm.
since you're an audiobook reader.
So I just bought a tablet so I can read print books again now that I got the glasses we talked about on the show.
Mhm.
And so I have appointment scheduled with the tech person at the local library. And apparently you can check out audiobooks because I listen faster than my wallet can
Yep.
afford to buy.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
So, and for something
Get-
that's classic and traditionally published, it's going to be in the library anyway. It's
Yeah.
kind of perfect.
Terry Pratchett.
Get with us afterward.
Oh,
We'll tell you where to
yeah.
start with the Discworld.
Oh my god.
All the Pratchett. All the
Right now,
Pratchett.
I'm reading this this gaming book. You might have heard of the War Master stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
I hear that Melissa McShane is a hack writer. So yeah, I
I mean,
don't
see,
know.
this is bad for your diet.
I
I
think
feel like
a
you
dodgy old
trigger
woman who
words.
might not be nice to you.
That's right.
Yeah. So, are there any trends in the reimagining of the fairy tales that you think you're seeing, or are they just taking the stories as we grew up with them, as we knew them, and inserting them into modern skin suits?
Oh, I see. I don't know.
What I see is a softening. I'm not sure if it's
Yeah.
accurate, but looking at the tropes that modern prolific indies are writing and the covers that they're using to try to describe their work, it feels like it is leaning into the small R romance of fairy tales, not necessarily the love story, but the historical significance of it and the existing love of it. And it feels like a softening to me, and I don't know if that's a fair representation, but that's my intuitive take on it.
It's been a while since I was actively reading retellings of fairy tales. So I can't. I have no idea what's going on now. But back in the day, they were very sharp-edged, very on point about the stories they were telling. So so maybe that's possible. Maybe there is a softening compared to what they've
Disney
been
already
telling.
started that.
Yeah, Disney. Well, Disney has a lot of other things that are going on, and their decisions in retelling fairy tales were actually kind of clever, I think. But that's a subject for a different podcast.
Write the subject down, and we'll come back to it then. I just know, like I said, my very German grandmother had very strong opinions about the way we changed the Brothers Grimm and all the Hans Christian Andersen and the very moral lessons that they taught, because they're supposed to scare you into doing the right thing. Don't touch the stove. It's hot. Is not. The stove won't give you a hug if you touch it while it's red. There's a big difference. One saves your life. So with that out of the way, we will come back to the disification issue on a future topic. Do you have any closing thoughts? Because it sounds like this topic has room for us to ramble for hours. And it is morning, and I understand Melissa needs to go make some eggs or, I don't know, milk a cow so she has breakfast.
Oh yeah, that's true. I don't have to milk the cow. Fortunately, the milk is delivered to my front porch, which I
Magic.
like. Yeah.
By swans?
I don't know.
It's delivered by swans?
Yeah, it's not delivered by swans. It's delivered by a nice little man who puts it in liquor bottles. Our milk comes in washed out liquor bottles because they are a tougher plastic and they come in liter sizes. So I get vodka bottles of, well, actually it's more likely to be bourbon or whiskey, but yeah, that's what the milk comes in.
Do you get a little pause when you drink your milk?
No.
Too many people.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when I was retelling fairy tales for myself, it was a whim. It was something to say, all right, here is an idea. I really liked this. I was obsessed with Andrew Lang's color fairy books when I was a teenager. And these are things that have shaped me. I wonder, what can I do with this? And I think that a directed approach maybe is a little more powerful. I'm not sure, but I think we retell these stories because they matter to us. And I think that the retellings give us insights, I would hope, into the original as well. So I think it needs to be a circle. I think it needs to be feeding into each other on some level.
Okay.
I think where my taste tends to more strongly direct is toward fairy tales that aren't taking an individual fairy tale as the source material so much as the structure of fairy tales more broadly and telling new fairy tales. Neil Gaiman's Stardust as an example, where it has all of the feelings of a fairy tale. It is a fairy tale. It's just not a specific piece of storytelling that has existed before. And I really, really love the way that telling a new story deep in the vein of the existing stories, not trying to modernize, not trying to tell fairy tales what they should have been, but just to add to the canon is really inspiring to me. I really like those.
Closing thoughts, Jenna?
Oh, closing thoughts. I think the interesting thing for me that I'm always looking for is when the retellings are not the most familiar of fairy tales. Because I like my Cinderella, I like my Beauty and the Beast, all those kinds of things, but they're the ones that I have seen versions of over and over again. And I would love to see, as we look at speculative retellings and that kind of stuff, some of those more obscure fairy tales get their chance, that we do more with Puss in Boots, that we touch on Donkey Skin, that we pull out some of these ones that when I was a kid, I had this big old volume of fairy tales, and my siblings would come downstairs. They weren't supposed to, but we did it anyway. They would come downstairs, and we were in bunk beds, and I was up on the top bunk, and they would all jump on top of the top bunk, and I would read them stories until they fell asleep from this big orange fairy tale book. And I wish that I still had it, but I remember those ones where they're like, tell us the weird ones, because we've heard Cinderella, we've heard this and the other. So I'd be flipping through it going, where's one that we haven't heard? And that's more of what I want to continue to see, because the tales are so important. The things that they tell us are so important. But I'd love to see more of the ones that are not always retold get their chance in the limelight.
Okay. We will add that to the list of future topics, and we will have to schedule some things. And maybe we can get our surprise guest that didn't make it this time because I sent the wrong link. And by the time I caught it, I don't know that they did. Oops. This is what I get for being organized and breaking patterns and not waiting till the last minute. See, I tried not to procrastinate and it bit me in the backside. All right. So with that, I know it's just not fair. Life is not kind, unlike the fairy tales. Anyway, so this is the part. Well, actually, the fairy tales weren't kind either, being honest. This is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. So do your part. And speaking of doing your part, you can also share this podcast. Tell your friend, tell your neighbor, tell everybody you know. Leave a comment in the comment section. Join the discussion. Join us over there on all the places, and we would greatly appreciate it. And we do value your insight. And with that, we're going to start with you, Jenna. If someone wanted to track you down on the wild interwebs, where might they stalk you?
Well, I am very, very easy to find on the wild interwebs. I am the loser internet hide and go seek. You can find me over at Linktree, linktr.ee/Opal Kingdom Press, or you can go direct to the press at opalkingdompress.com, or you can look at either one of these pen names all over all of the places. And if it has to do with those pen names and publishing, it is me almost all the time. You know, send a message out into the void, and I'll probably hear you and follow you around like a, scary old witch that's going to solve your problems or at least feed you cookies.
Cookies. All right, Chloe, where might we stalk you on the wild interwebs?
All right, you can find me at chloegarner.com if you want to buy stickers and signed books, or see what my latest essay on various topics relevant to writing are. If you just want to know when I got a new book out from me, when you can follow my newsletter or just follow me on Amazon. They will let you know every time a new book comes out. If you want to hang out with me as an actual human being, come and join my Facebook group. It is my favorite place on the entire internet.
And this just came up because I was thinking about your newsletter since you mentioned it specifically. If you have an author you follow and you like getting the newsletter, you can go into your email and you can whitelist it, adding it to your contacts. So when it comes in, you automatically see it. Because I was just thinking, last week I saw her 12 Days of Christmas email from her newsletter showed up finally. And I'm guessing we're way past Christmas since we recorded this at the end of March. So if you don't want those delays, to include things like, oh, I don't know, hey, books are on sale. If you'd like to get those messages while the books are still on sale at 99 cents or whatever great retailer price, then, add them to your contacts. It's called whitelisting the site. And most of the time that will increase your odds of receiving it.
I actually put the instructions to that at the bottom of every newsletter.
Oh, that is cool. I had to do that to yours, and I didn't think to check. I just knew how to do it because I've done it for other people when I got the Christmas post in March.
Yep.
So apparently your tiara offended the powers that be, and they were just like, no, you shall not pass.
Can I tell the tiara story really, really fast?
Yes, you should.
Absolutely,
I was just thinking that you hadn't yet.
I am wearing a tiara today in honor of fairy tales, because one of the writers' conferences that I go to for very many years, all of the fairy tale writers would wear a tiara on the second to last day of the conference, and they would take a giant tiara picture. And then after a few years, there were a lot of other authors who really, really wanted to wear a tiara all day because, dude, that was fun. And so they opened it to anybody who wanted to wear a tiara on the second to last day. We had Tiara Day, but it was always in honor of the fairy tale retelling authors. And I am in one of those pictures, and they make me happy. So I am in a fairy tale tiara today.
Woohoo!
All right. So you can hear all those stories and more, again, if you follow these great authors on their web pages. So
You didn't ask Melissa where she can be found.
We're about to do that. I was just selling it one more time.
Thank you, JR.
But since Mother Hen, herder of cats and kittens and all the things, already prompted it, Melissa, you can answer me or you can answer Jana. I don't care. But where might we find you on the Wild Water Networks?
You can find me at melissamcshanewrites.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter, which is sent monthly. You can find my storefront at nightharborpress.com, where I sell audiobooks, ebooks, and signed print books. And that's a great way to go and get stuff out of Jana's basement. And you could also follow me on Amazon. They will, as Madam Chloe says, send you notifications, and they are actually pretty good at it. And I have a Discord server that is a lot of fun. We have been discussing War Master, and it's been enjoyable. The latest idea is a cookbook of all the many, many delicious meals that show up in the War Master books and make people very hungry.
I'm good with that.
I am not the only one that noticed that, because Aaron of Big Water Outdoors did as well.
You are not. Everybody notices it.
So
I don't know.
He told me I need to be a less good at being a crack dealer, because he bought all the books on one setting after the first.
I'm so proud of him. That was fantastic. I was really thrilled.
I thought they'd be up his alley, because he's all over the place with his reading. But we'll have to have him back, because he enjoyed coming on for the movie reviews, and we have more movies to review. And if you're listening to this, because this is going to be airing not too long after recording it, the guests we had warranted it when I scheduled it, and then things happened and they weren't able to make it. But one of the changes we're just making official. One is, when we do movie reviews, we used to keep everything to speculative fiction or military, because Nick and I's branding was, military veterans that started this podcast. And before Nick, it was Doc Saska and Chris Winder, also veterans. We've decided that is not enough. So we are counting in that slot first responder stuff, because I think it's the same venue, which means some of the content we review, it might not be speculative fiction, but if it fits military or first responders, we're going to go with it. So some of the classic war movies, The Dirty Dozen, which will be coming out soon, that we reviewed. Or in this case, it was recommended Police Academy, the movies, which were amazing. that guy that did the voices, I would love it if he narrated audiobooks. That would just be awesome. And with that, you could find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we linked all the things, the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the TikTok, the Twitters. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Substack, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author Handley. Be sure to play in the comment section. This is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee, tea, and hot chocolate until they get high on their own supply. If you want some of that delicious caffeinated goodness, the links in the show notes. The discount code is Podcast Grunts. You get 10% off this fine gourmet product. We get a little bit of a kickback. We keep the lights on. It's a win-win, people. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Hanley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, and we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom shakalaka. And with that, we're going to hit the end button. Thank you for coming on, Melissa, Chloe, Jana. You're kind of stuck with us, but thank you too.
We'll manage.
And we're gonna come back to more of these fairy tale topics because it sounds like these ladies had more opinions. With that,
Well,
hit the end.